Hey everybody, welcome to the Bridge the Gap DFS podcast YouTube channel. Very excited for our guest today. This has been a podcast that we've been trying to get going for a few months now. When I launched the podcast, this is one of the first guests I wanted to have on. He's seen all over the industry. He's loved by just about everybody in the community. One of our favorites, Dave Loughran. Loughy, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. It's an honor to be on with you, dude. We've known each other for a little while now. I believe we actually did, like, back in the day, some Skype DFS sessions maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It was a while, maybe 2 or so years ago, and that's how we became introduced to each other. So it's nice to be back in touch.
Yeah, I really appreciated you taking the time to do that. It was I actually looked it up this morning because I was curious about it, and it was January 2nd, 2018. So.
Oh, it was only 2 years ago.
Yeah,
huh?
I know. It's crazy how much time flies. And the interesting thing about that is I think that we ended up scheduling an hour. We went over 2 hours. So, I mean, as busy as you are and the generosity that you showed me, and that call changed everything for me from an NBA perspective. So I've become really good at DFS NBA. I'm actually struggling this year, but the last 2 years has been absolutely incredible, and the genesis of me becoming, a casual player to getting more serious and starting looking deeper at things came from that call. So thank you again for that.
Man. And congrats on the success.
Thanks. It's been awesome, man. I think one of the areas of opportunity in DFS is helping people get in touch with the right resources to figure this thing out, because it can be drinking like a fire hose when you commit to, hey, I want to be serious at this. And I just remember just drowning for probably about 2 years before finding people like you and Manny and, some of the tools that I'm using now. So I know how intimidating it can be for a new player to try to get this thing figured out.
Well, no question. I mean, when I first started playing DFS, I was terrible, and naturally, right? Because you come into it with the idea that, and I mean, right at the beginning of everything. I'm talking, I think 2013, when DFS was new. Like DraftKings was. The inception of DraftKings was maybe a month or two prior to me falling into this. Heard a FanDuel commercial on the radio, listening to sports radio, and I tried it. And, really the assumption that everybody has when they first start, not everybody, but back in the day when it was still pretty small and very niche, it was like, hey, I love sports. I'm good at fantasy sports. I should be okay at this. And it's like, it's the biggest misconception ever. And I tell anyone today that's getting into it, my neighbors play now, we're good friends. And like, don't take everything you think you know about fantasy sports and throw it out the window, right? The researching, as you know, is totally different, because you're researching what's going to happen each day, not how they're going to do on the season. It's applicable to any sport. And then I started getting decent at it because I put so much time into it. If you ask my wife today, she was not happy. Like, I quit my job. I stopped. Here's where I have a problem. I don't know. I've told you this before. And if I'm rambling, you can feel free to just shut me up. But I had like some pretty serious substance abuse issues when I was younger. You and I have talked before.
Right.
Like, it was bad, to the point where if I kept going, you wouldn't be talking to me today.
Right.
And it's still very easy for me to fall into like grabbing onto something and having it just become a complete obsession. And it happened to the point where with DFS, I had 3 classes left to get my degree and stopped going, like just stopped going. And it's not like, I don't admit that to most people, but it's something I'm not proud of. I ended up fortunately turning the DFS content providing into it's a solid career for myself, though. So psychology major would have been nonsense anyway. But the point being, I started getting solid and making a lot of money playing DFS. And then I hit a lull where I just wasn't, and I'm sure you could probably relate to this, I wasn't fine-tuning my skills at the rate that the industry and other players were fine-tuning and progressing with theirs, right? So you have CSV edits and you have so many people beginning to do so much more than just knowing who the good plays were. And you see, just with leverage and the tournament strategies that you see, it took me a while to change that and try to get back on track, because I can talk to you and I can give you every good player from every game and know about anybody, know anyone in the industry, or know as much about any player as anyone in the industry. But to win in DFS now, it takes a whole lot more than that. And that was something that there was certainly a learning curve there for me as well, getting into the industry so early.
And that's one of the things that I'm currently struggling with. And, I've had issues of my own where I get very hyper obsessive about something. And when something in my world is out of whack, it's all I can think about. And the beginning of this NBA season has been an adjustment, and it's been driving me crazy. And I'm, at hopefully the tail end of like the biggest downswing I've ever been in. And it racks your brain and it drives you insane. So I can totally relate to a lot of that. And you're touching on a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about. So before we dive deeper into that, why don't you walk us back, just start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up? Talk about your love for sports, how you initially got into fantasy sports, and then we'll pick it back up where we just left off.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up, and again, I'm a little long-winded, so my apologies.
No, this is exactly what I wanted. This is beautiful.
Yeah, I grew up in a small cottage, a small farm town in Northern Ireland, and no, I'm kidding. I didn't. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia, and I lived there, first 18 years of my life. I went off to school. That didn't work out too well the first time. And then I went, because again, I was a drug addict, put it simply. But yeah, I grew up in Pennsylvania, nice town, suburban town. My dad passed away last year from cancer, but he was an infectious disease doctor, and he gave us a good life. He didn't spoil us at all. But I was comfortable, right? And parents got separated at 11 years old. It was brutal. Mm-hmm. Just like sheer hatred. Try and not do that with your own kids, And then there was like a big fracturing in my life at that point, because I had a younger brother and a younger sister. I was kind of the only one at that point to understand kind of what was going on. And that's when a couple of years later, I fell into some bad habits. Obviously speeding everything up, but ended up getting like a couple suspensions, expulsions in high school for reasons we won't get into. And it just went down like a really dark path. I ended up at 21 years old saying like, look, I can't do this anymore, and put all of my energy into turning my life around. It's tough when you're seeing people that you grew up with as friends going to college and graduating college, right, and landing solid jobs, and you've got nothing. And that was that was kind of the impetus for me saying I can't. And I by happenstance, John, fell into DFS. I just started playing it. And then I remember there was a site. How long have you been playing DFS for?
So I want to say I first got into it around 2012 with some of the fringe sites that aren't around anymore, just like playing $10 a weekend kind of thing.
Okay, so before me, probably 2012, 2013 for me. I guess, yeah, we probably got in around the same time. Well, then you'd remember the reason I asked. There was a site called Fan Throwdown. Okay. Back when Condia was big, and Two Gun, who just won his, I think, third Millie Maker earlier this year, which is insane, right? Awesome player. He was I remember they were running some big contests at Fan Throwdown, and Two Gun took 100K, I think, second place, and Condia was up there as well. But that was a site they disappeared. Actually, the guy that one of the owners, they were brothers. There was some type of sexual abuse charge that got out in the industry, and people started losing their minds about it. And yeah, it was, of course, you don't want to get into all of that, but that's why the site disappeared. One of the reasons the site just disappeared. They took their chat down that same day because it got so out of control. But I'd spoken to one of the brothers and said, like, hey, do you know anybody that would let me write for them or do any content? And he got me in touch with Chet Grisham from the Fake Basketball, all of those, the fake sites, really good guy. And he gave me an opportunity there. And it wasn't, obviously, you're not making a lot. It's virtually nothing. But I started doing that. And then the next year I ran the basketball content. And then Dave Kitchen from now Roto Grinders,
Right,
previously he started Fantasy Insiders. He had heard about me and brought me over there. And then it just kind of took off from there. So it was really an organic process. It was doing something I really, really liked. And this was in the midst of working full time. I was a drug and alcohol therapist for 7 years, and in the midst of still going to school. But I just loved doing this more than anything else. And, fortunately, I can do it every day now and get paid for it.
So what gave you the courage or the tenacity or just the straight up ignorance to place a big bet on yourself like that, to keep pursuing it when everyone else in your life is looking at you funny, or, hey, you're writing about a game, talk to us about that.
It's total ignorance, but I think in a good way, right? Like motivated ignorance, where you're doing I was doing what I was doing. Now, for those that are curious, as a drug and alcohol therapist, at the lower level, you're not making anything. You get your bachelor's degree, maybe you're making like $35,000, $40,000. You get your master's degree, which, of course, you'd be paying off forever. And this is the thought process going through my mind at the time. If that's the case, you're maybe making like $45,000 with a master's. Now, of course, you make more as time goes on, but at the position I was at without my degree at the time, it would have taken so long to get anywhere. And I loved helping people. I worked with juveniles 13 to 18, and it was some of the most rewarding work I've ever done. I tell my wife sometimes I'd love to go back and work some weekend shifts. I don't have the time, but when I do, I want to go back and do that because it is awesome work. And they respect somebody like me that has the experience that they do and didn't just, read about it. Not to say that those people can't also help, but, and I just decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this. And I didn't just quit. I didn't quit my job before I had gotten anywhere. I quit my job once I had like some kind of a foothold in the industry. But it still wasn't enough. Like looking back, it was really risky. And when I had downswings from a DFS standpoint, it was terrifying, right? Because I didn't really have anything coming in anywhere else. I wasn't like at startup sites and the fake basketball. They're not paying you enough to keep your lights on and to pay rent.
Right.
So it was just, hey, I love this. And I would wake up every morning and I would start researching DFS, whether it be basketball or football or baseball. And there's something about it that I'm sure you share the same feeling. There's something about it that even like winning is one thing. Winning, of course, is the holy grail of all of this. But the process is almost equally attractive to me than the playing and the winning.
Yeah, I think that you just hit on something that's very key when I'm working with players and trying to get them pointed in the right direction. I can tell almost instantly the ones that are going to make it versus the ones that are going to struggle, and the ones that just want the get rich quick. They see the payouts at the top and they want to be the next Awesemo or whomever. Yeah. They're not going to make it. It's the guys that it's like, you would do this shit for free. If I couldn't make money at DFS, like I would still I'm just fascinated with putting together the puzzle. I've been getting my teeth kicked in for 6 weeks straight. And I woke up this morning fired up because it's like today could be the day that I get this thing figured out. And when you do, there's just something just so incredibly gratifying about like when it clicks and when it hits everything. I just can't, nothing I've invested myself in more than this is more satisfying when it works.
No question. And there's an addictive nature to it for somebody like me. But I can assure you it's a whole lot less destructive than anything else. Oh, sure. Right?
Yeah.
And, I've built some like really valuable and cherished friendships in DFS. You generally don't get that when you're into, the other stuff. So it's a net positive for sure. And the people that you'll come across are some really good people. Like, for instance, we don't know each other too well, but you've always been one of the kindest guys that I've spoken to. And I think you find how much you have in common with people. You really do develop legitimate friendships. And look across the industry for how long, you've been around it, how long I've been around it. And it's pretty incredible the amount of people that you come in contact with and find commonalities with. And, these are people that are, some of them in Canada, California, like yourself, across the country. And you build like actual lasting, meaningful bonds with these people. So it's more than just playing DFS. Just the entire culture of it is something that if most people had gotten into it and enjoyed sports like we do, I think the outsiders looking in might understand it better if they saw that there's a whole lot more to it than just running numbers each and every day.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think you nailed something that is so incredibly valuable to the community, and it's commonality. The best relationships that I have in DFS, these guys are hardworking family guys. I don't know where they stand politically. I don't care. All of the stuff that our culture places all this emphasis on that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And then to see them succeed, it's just like, I before I got to know some of these people, I would be so jealous. And then you get to know them and you see them succeed. Like one of my guys who I have a good relationship with, he went to Fresno State also, and he pops, over 20 grand or almost 20 grand the other night. And he won 50 grand a month ago, Jordan Butler. And it's just like, that is so damn cool, man, to see these people like investing in themselves into something that can literally change their life. It's just, I don't know if there's anything, it's definitely not without fault, but there's something very pure about DFS that is very attractive.
Oh, no question. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing seeing people that you've helped along the way, blossom as players and really become like quality players, sometimes better than yourself, right? Like sometimes people figure something out that you didn't figure out, but you put them on the path to do it. And all of that is really valuable. And there's no like right way to do it either. There's no right, there's a wrong way, right? I think you'd agree. There's definitely a wrong way, but there isn't one specific right way. Like I can assure you that Chipotle Addict and Osimo have different processes that oftentimes end in the same result, right? I mean, right. Yep. we know that because they don't have the same results each week. It's obvious, and they're both phenomenal players. So there's different ways to get there. But going back to your point about just like politics in this, I would say this is what's great about DFS. My politics are unquestionably different from most people that I'm friends with in the DFS industry. No question. I would say that I have minority political opinions. Now, of course, nothing crazy, right? Like nothing crazy. I'm not an extremist. I just have different views than a lot of people, right?
Right.
But that's the greatest part is that so you look at how polarized this country is politically. And I don't want to get us down a rabbit hole, but I'll come full circle. You look at how polarized this country is politically, right? You watch YouTube videos with people screaming and spitting on each other because of their political affiliation and what their beliefs are and their ideologies. And there's no room for rational conversation, right? There's no room for that diversity of thought anymore. Right. Diversity of intellect, any of that. I have so many close friends in this industry that we fundamentally disagree on almost like everything politically, but we'll have conversations about it and still love each other at the end of the day. Like Dan Strafford, I've been hosting a podcast with, great guy, for 6 years now almost. We've been hosting the same podcast. We've jumped from site to site, but same format, same two guys. And we don't agree on anything politically, but we always find a way we always come to a conclusion where we find common ground. And like that's what's so cool about this. You have DFS in common, and you don't need to have everything else in common. There's always room to have these conversations. And I found that about most people in this industry that I've become friends with. They're not unwilling to have that conversation, even if we know that neither of us is going to give up much ground in the end.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that you start building bonds over, hey, was Tristan Thompson 2 nights ago, was that a great play or not? And you find that commonality, and all of a sudden, your sharp edges have been made softer by these things that you have in common. And then that opens up the dialect to, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with that, but I understand where you're coming from, and you can sympathize with their point of view. And everybody's background is different, and everybody is struggling with something in life. And my biggest thing is I hate the distractions in life that can rob us of our joy. When when we're here and we get to play this game, like how fucking lucky are we? It's like anybody that gets to devote as much time to DFS as we do, like all things considered, we don't really have any real problems. Like we're good. You know what I mean?
Oh, no question, dude. The fact that like I'll complain about certain work that I have, like the during football and basketball, the crossover, my plate is really full from a workload standpoint. But it's ridiculous to complain about stuff like this. I mean, imagine, and I know it when I do it. Like with a buddy of mine that I work with, we'll complain about something, and then at the end of every conversation, it's like, well, hey, we're still talking about daily fantasy sports every day, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to get up in your head sometimes, and having these relationships to just like, there's some guys that I talk to on a daily basis, and it's like, can I just be crazy for a second? Can I just vent some irrational bullshit that's in my head just to get it out to feel normal? And that's where these relationships are so key. And that is probably my favorite thing about the community. And there's some rivalries and there's some toxicity, but that's going to be with anything. But I feel like for the most part, even people that are seemingly misunderstood by their public personas in the DFS community are usually pretty good guys. There's some guys that are very polarizing in the industry, and it's like, regardless of what you say about that guy, like that guy did something for me in a big way, and I will always go to bat for that guy, so.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple outright assholes, but I'm sure there's some good in them too. And it's funny you say that, though. There's always a silver lining, man. There's always something good about someone. I mean, trust me, I got plenty of poor qualities about myself, but I think I make up for it in other ways. I think we all do. But the community is just a fantastic thing in the DFS world, and like even on Twitter, that's where I think when you talk about toxicity, most of it stems from Twitter, right?
Sure. Yep.
You have biggest dick competitions somewhere on Twitter every single day, so. If you just treat that as entertainment and go along for the ride, Twitter's a great place to be too.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's funny because the one thing I don't want to be on Twitter is divisive. So I try to just be very positive. But there's definitely, I liken it to, it's kind of like the theatrics, the WWE, of DFS, where some of these guys are getting into it. And it's like, there's some guys that are posting things that are getting people all upset, and it's like, do you not understand like what this guy is doing? Like this guy is Vince McMahon of DFS. Like every person that's upset about what he said is talking about it and getting like you are feeding into what he wants from you. But that's the nature of our culture, and DFS isn't immune from it. But yeah, I just think that having a healthy community and network and friends and people to lean on, because it's just like, sometimes you have a bad day and it's like, am I really, is this guy not getting the value? Is this really like the worst thing? Like this is so like when you take yourself out of it and having people to help you check that reality, helps you, get back to center when you're just being an asshole because, Jaren Jackson got into foul trouble last night,
Every night.
Every night. Jaren Jackson,
Jaren Jackson, that's right. Oh man! Speaking of that, is it not the worst feeling when you perfectly project a player's minutes, right?
Yeah.
You perfectly project their rotation down to like 30 seconds, and they're super low owned. I know I'm way off subject here, but you mentioned Jaren Jackson.
This is all good.
Where you project everything perfectly, like you nailed it. And in basketball, that matters most. Like
everything.
You're not even really projecting the good or bad performance when it comes to like a cheap guy at low ownership that everyone else is projecting for 22 minutes and you're giving them 30. Mm-hmm. Like that's all that matters is those 8 extra minutes because no one's playing them at 22 minutes. And then they get the 30 minutes and they're just downright dog shit.
Yep.
That happened a lot last night.
Yep. And that's the frustrating thing with the NBA is projections are gold. They're going to be based off of minutes, and a lot of conversation I'm seeing lately is people trying to be too different at the top, and it's like you take a guy like Dinwiddie 2 nights ago with the Kyrie out, like that guy should be in every single one of your lineups.
Amazing that he was only 50% on the most large field tournaments. Amazing.
Don't overthink that. Get different towards the middle and the bottom of what you're doing. And like you said, that's I don't really like the wisdom of the crowd approach. I know going back to what you're talking about, Osimo and Chipotle, it can work. I like to be, I like to stand down on an island, light my money on fire. And if my guy does what nobody else thinks he does, I get to keep my money and all of their money. That's just how I play, So
sure.
I can totally relate to what you're saying. So I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I still actually really like the thought process. Is I was building NFL lineups Saturday night. I completed my build, and normally I play 7 quarterbacks, and I'll build around those 7 quarterbacks. And
are you MMing or you max one? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll build 150. I build 150 for every slate, every sport. It's just what I've just grown most comfortable with. I read an Osmo article a couple years ago, and
it's a great article, by the way. It's free.
It is, and it's one that I point to people too often. And my whole attitude was like, this was before like they had the Minimax, and I was like, if I want to be one of the best in the world, I got to learn how to play 150. So even though I couldn't get into the big 150s, I would just pretend like I had 150. I had 150 entries. I didn't care what they paid out. I just wanted to get better at it. Anyway, so I finished my builds, and I'm like, these are pretty crappy. Like, I don't have very much McCaffrey. I don't have very much Michael Thomas. And so I just, like, started getting really creative, and I was like, you know what? This Raiders pass defense can't stop anybody. With Ryan Finley and his guys, I can afford everybody. So
I know, dude.
So I ran 150 Ryan Finley lineups, and I had a bunch of Chark and a bunch of Mac, and I'm sitting there like, oh crap, like I have the nuts. Like if this guy does anything, I have the nuts. And you look at the game logs and you see what Dalton did, and it's like I know they're different, but it's like if this guy can, just get to 20 points, like I'm going to print money today. And then of course he sucked, and then you second guess it, and it's just like. That's the hard part of DFS was what I did, was that wrong, or was that a good process, bad result? So it's a fine line, and it's very easy to hindsight everything and be like, dude, you're an idiot, you shouldn't have done that. Or what are you projecting this guy who can get into foul trouble for 30 minutes when he's going to get in foul trouble and get 20? It's like, but we're not looking for what everybody thinks they're going. We're trying to find those outliers to make the big splashes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Did you say you ran Finley in every lineup?
Yeah, 150 Finley.
Oh my god,
dude! I'm sitting there, and it's like I have some lineups. Like I probably headed into the afternoon slate. I had like 50 lineups that had Chark, Kamara, and Mac, and then I have Finley plus his 2 guys plus Ertz plus Miles Sanders over the field, and I'm like, dude, like we could have something here, and then. After the first quarter, he has 40 yards, and I'm like, I think I'm losing today. But that's the other thing, too, is when I made that decision, I also immediately decreased my volume because I knew I was taking a higher variance stance on something.
Right.
So, the week before, I think I played like $1,500, where when I decided to do the Finley thing, I'm like, you know what, I'm only going to play $500 today. And I only won back like $65, and it sucks to lose that kind of money. And if you look at that kind of money, like, oh, I lost a car payment or whatever, it's very difficult. But in the overall,
you can't think of it that way.
You can't, and that's why I stress so hard with people about bankroll management. And I'm a very conservative player when it comes to the amount of money that I put into play, and I think that's one of the things that's really helped me more than anything. But it's and everybody can look at that and say I played it incorrectly, and I know that But you're sitting there and you have 100% of a guy that's owned in 2% of the lineups going against a terrible pass defense, and it was probably overly aggressive, but
sometimes it works. Yeah, I had when it comes to cornerbacks, I try not to think about it too much, but there are certain cornerbacks that I don't want to play guys against,
sure. And
I have a ton of respect for James Bradbury. He is not allowed a touchdown in coverage all season long. And Julio's always going to get his. Right. But is he going to get his to the point where he's worth his salary? And we'll have the same question with Michael Thomas this week. So I said, I'm going all in on Calvin Ridley. He was my highest owned player.
Oh, awesome.
And it paid off huge. But here's where it didn't. I ended up like breaking even on the week because I said, man, Jameis and Evans and Godwin in a 51 over-under game, the ownership to me is too low when their price tags aren't above 7,500. Godwin and Evans. I said, I'm just going to do it. And Marshawn Lattimore being out was huge for me. Mm-hmm. If Lattimore was in, I would have loaded up on Godwin. Otherwise, having both of them, I said, I got to do it. And I had a lot of them. And, it just sometimes doesn't work. But then you'll see, like I do a show every Monday on YouTube for Awesemo with Manny Laura. And it's like a process show where we go on Fantasy Cruncher Pro and Fantasy Cruncher, lineup study, and we just look at like the top scorers, who won and what they did and what we did right and what we did wrong, and it's a really fun process. I know people enjoy watching it because even if you don't max enter these contests, you get a good idea of what people are doing. And we looked at it last week and a couple weeks ago too. It's remarkable that. I don't want to use the word luck because there's an element of skill always that goes into these. You need a combination of both. But I always wonder, man, how do I not get this to happen when he's got 1% Josh Allen, literally one Josh Allen lineup, one John Brown lineup, and one Devontae Adams lineup. So he must have had, the positional stacks where you got to run back a player with it. And he had one Stephon Diggs lineup. And all of them happened to be in the exact same lineup. And he won $1 million, right? Or it was maybe the 200,000 or 100 for the power suite. But you get my point,
right?
Like sometimes all the pieces just fall into place, and it's literally 4 guys in this lineup that you have 1 or 2 of in 150 lineups, and you just throw your hands up if something like that happens and move on to the next week.
Yeah, there's definitely, it's funny because I see this a lot with like a sport like baseball where you'll be on the right stack, but it's a high-scoring night, and it just doesn't move the needle. And then the next night, you're on a team that only scores 7 runs, but no one else is scoring runs. And it's just like, I just try to look at it from that perspective where some nights I don't get what I should have won, and then other nights I get way more than I should have won. And you just got to take it and move forward. I meant to do this in the beginning, but can you plug everything that you're on for the audience?
Yeah, sure. SiriusXM Fantasy, Sirius 210 XM 87. It's Awesemo Radio. 5 to 7 on Saturday, 7 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. It's a lot of fun. I do it with, and Manny Laura. Yep. I know you mentioned that he helped you in your process as well. A good buddy of mine. We've been working together since the Fan Vice days. Yep. And I brought him over with me for the Awesemo Radio. He's just a sharp guy, and I love doing shows with him. I think, he's just, as a good person to work with, and like a genuinely good person. Also, awesemo.com. God, I don't have time to tell you all of the shows, but the NBA strategy show in the morning, NFL strategy show, we started this where we're doing them Monday through Saturday. It's a lot of fun. That's the process show. And then the deeper dive show on youtube.com/Awesemo as well with Adam Scher and myself. Adam, real sharp guy, great DFS player. We're on from 5 to 6 Monday through Friday. So I think there's more, but mostly SiriusXM and Awesemo.com.
And I think with the amount of content that is out there, I think it's very smart for new players to attach themselves to guys that get it and have been around a while and are great teachers. And everybody you just listed is somebody that I've learned from, and it's been very instrumental in my process. And I really want to try to stick to showcasing guys like you, guys like Manny. I don't have a relationship with Adam yet, but I plan on building one with him. And
I'll get you in touch with him.
Because I think it's so important to learn about what makes you tick, because that resonates with people, and you're more likely to connect with somebody that's come from a similar background. I was a psychology major in college as well, and I quit. The only reason I graduated from college is I found a major that was willing to take all of the psychology classes I had and give me credit and let me graduate in a year and a half.
So what was the major?
So it's kind of ironic because my degree was mass communication and journalism, which since starting this website is actually what I'm doing now. So, but I haven't used up until then. But yeah, man, I just think that the way that your brain works and the way that you can simply explain complicated issues to a dum-dum like me to make it look sense, like one of the first things you ever open up my eyes to is, when we look at NBA defenses, start looking at not necessarily how bad this defense is, what are they bad at? And then if this defense is bad at pick and roll, you should be jamming in Harden and Capella or Westbrook and Steven Adams. And it's just like, holy crap, man, like that makes sense to me. If I can't understand something in 5 minutes, or you start getting into formulas or algorithms or Excel codes, like I'm out. Like my brain just doesn't work that way, So I highly encourage people to latch on to people that come from the type of backgrounds or communicate in such a way like that, someone like you or Manny does, that helps break something complicated down to something simple to where I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. I can get on board with this. Yeah,
no question. And like Excel, for example, in the workbooks, that was just like so above my head. But Josh Engelman, who's over at Awesemo with us, again, somebody else that, become close with him, only known him for maybe a year and a couple months. And, you find you have things in common with people, and you enjoy talking to them. You enjoy doing shows with them. We do a great show together Monday and Friday mornings. And like we thoroughly enjoy working, which is kind of cool. He is just absolutely awesome with Excel and building models and stuff. And he's helped me just an incredible amount to like get a grasp of it. I mean, I'll never be at that level. It's insane. It really it's a different language, right? But he's put me in a position to where I'm better with it now, and I can use that for my process because, with the way that the direction the DFS has taken, it's very easy to get left behind.
It really is. And I think this is where, going back to our community discussion earlier, is connecting with people that are better at something than you are, and vice versa, and being able to lean on them for their skills. One of the guys that I have in my network or whatever is just like a master programmer and a master automator, and I got him involved with the site, and he's putting together stuff to help people because he's a dad. And shout out to my boy Shammy, and he's got kids, and he's on the Central Time Zone, and Locke is around dinner, and it's like, I don't have any kids. I have dogs. My wife and I have 3 rescue dogs. So my time commitment is pretty easy. I do some private consulting outside of DFS. Doesn't take up a lot of time. So I start my process an hour and a half before, way more than I need to because I can, But most people, the reality for the other 90% of people is, dude, I got 15 minutes to make this work. And
for sure.
So I think that, what you're saying about just connecting with people is it's one of the most invaluable assets of start making friends out there, with all the discords and chats that are out there. Get comfortable reaching out to people that you're connecting with in the chats. I think that's a big thing. One of the things that I think I would be remiss about not talking about with having you on the podcast is I look at you as my Philadelphia sports czar liaison. Anything Philadelphia related. I have a heart for Philadelphia. I've never been there, but I don't know if it's because I love cheesesteaks or I grew up watching Rocky or always loved an underdog. But the Fly Eagles Fly is just awesome. And, I have my pick for winning the NBA title this year is the Sixers, but it's like sometimes I can
throw that bet slip away.
Sometimes I can get a little too big for my britches. And I remember after their offseason, I was like, dude, can they do it? And you're like, I don't know, man. I like their offseason, but there's some things that concern me. So let's before we talk to this, I want to say the Sixers. Let's talk about the Eagles real quick. What are your thoughts on the current status of the Eagles as an organization and this season? Just let us hear what you think about the Eagles right now.
There's so many DFS players that like have no allegiance to any team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I never make decisions based on homerism that will crush you, no question.
Right.
Especially when you're a fan of a bunch of shitty teams.
Right.
But by the way, I should have mentioned at the top of the show, I am an eternal pessimist, so
okay.
Bear with me.
Okay.
But that's just never like now knowing a team better can help you.
Sure.
It can definitely help you, but basing decisions solely on any type of fandom or love for a team, you see it happen so often where like It'll be, remember the Thursday and I'll get into the Eagles, but remember the Thursday through Monday slates before they started these showdowns?
Oh, yeah,
right?
where everyone would play like everybody in that game kind of a thing.
Yeah, so it'd be like the Packers and the Niners, and the guy in first place after the Thursday night game has 5 Packers in his lineup, and his avatar is a Packers helmet. So Jermichael Finley. But it's funny to see that stuff, and it never works.
Right.
But with the Eagles, man, I don't think you can overstate how much Frank Reich meant to that organization. I'm sure you see me tweet about it a lot. They miss him dearly. They absolutely do. I mean, Mike Groh has not been good. Doug Peterson's creativity seems to have completely disappeared, which of course makes you wonder how much was Frank Reich the architect of this offense? I don't know, but I know that they're not the same. Now, you could of course make the argument of, well, they haven't had the weapons. Yeah, Deshaun Jackson going down is huge. Against the Patriots, Nelson Aguilar, who is maybe the worst receiver in the league. Slight hyperbole, but definitely the worst ball tracker in the league. It's just, you want to get pissed off, just watch Nelson Aguilar as an Eagles fan. But yeah, the weapons are limited, no question. But you're also like running Boston Scott out there for 20 snaps. I don't know. They're frustrating, John. They're 5-5. The Cowboys aren't that good, even though they smoked them. There's still a chance to get in, but the defense has improved. Jalen Mills has looked great lately. Avonte Maddox has improved, but then the offense disappears. And Carson Wentz is to blame here, but Nelson Aguilar's got to make some of these catches. They'd have 7 wins or 8 wins had he done that. But ultimately, the offense is just sputtering. Now, you get me started on the Sixers. I know there's a lot of Brett Brown backers out there. I don't buy it. If you have this roster, right? I know it's still earlier in the season, but it feels like Brett Brown, and I get that this is not like a factual take, of course, but it feels like Brett Brown hasn't done anything to get the most out of these players. And let me throw it back to you. I don't want to make it a Philadelphia podcast, but I think anyone can appreciate this. Ben Simmons now, several seasons with the team.
Right.
With his just raw talent and athleticism, do you not think there's any coaches out there that would say, listen, dude, you got to start shooting. You don't have to shoot a lot, but you've got to shoot. And it seems like Brett Brown and company are just complacent with him not shooting. And I think I said to you on Twitter when you had asked about the Sixers, you say, can they win? They can win if Brett Brown or if Ben Simmons learns how to shoot or begins to shoot even 25% from 3. Can't be any worse than Tobias Harris this season. I think that's a huge factor in this team, and it shows that the offense grinds to a halt when Ben's playing off the ball, because what's he going to do?
Well, and I have a couple of friends that will send me, because they know that I'm a Ben Simmons truther, and they'll send me stuff about his shot statistics, and it's like, who cares? Like, why can't he be their Draymond Green? And that's where I think it gets into the creativity of whatever Brown's doing, or maybe even the complacency. It's like, what I saw when I watched the Rising Star game last year, when everyone was talking, I forget who they were talking about, but I think Simmons came out and he had like 25 points in like the first like quarter and a half, just being aggressive. It's like, why can't we just have him drive and kick more? Or, that's the thing that baffles me the most about I think that team with their length and their defensive prowess is going to be, they should be the toughest out in all of the NBA. And with all of that potential, what are we missing here? So I agree with you in the sense of, I appreciate that, Brown had to be there for the lean years, but, are we looking at a Bucks Budenholzer type situation where we need somebody that can get this? I'm with you, man, because I just don't understand how him getting more aggressive, whether that's shooting or driving or getting to the free throw line. The guy's a 6'10" ball handler that can do it all. I just don't understand.
And the aggressiveness appears to have disappeared to some extent this season, which is equally concerning to me. I mean, you're talking about someone that hauls in a defensive rebound and has a head of steam. There's no way, like, you cannot tell me that he's not capable of splitting these defenders at full speed as he's barreling down the court in transition. Like, of course he can, but he hasn't been doing it. And that's what makes no sense to me. I mean, with the ability he has, he can get to the basket, and you're not even seeing that as much anymore. I'm honestly baffled by it, and I don't know what's changed. But he's averaging 2 fewer drives per game than he did last season. He will drive into the paint and then kick it out. But the problem is it's become so predictable that the defense can just set up. It's frustrating, man. I think the team has a ton of talent. Richardson's a solid player, but the 3-point shooting's been really bad. And I do think they find their stride. I think they're going to find their footing going forward. But look, when it's early in the season, and once again, you're losing games to Phoenix. Credit to Phoenix, they've played well. You're losing to OKC with that roster. You're beating Atlanta on the last shot of the game. You beat Portland on the last shot of the game. This is a Portland team that's lost, like 7 straight?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a difficult thing to evaluate. But if Ben starts shooting, I promise you I'll change. And I'll admit if I'm wrong, if it doesn't make a difference. But he doesn't need to be a lights-out J.J. Redick shooter. Right. He just needs to once in a while shoot.
Well, and we see that with Draymond Green he's not a great shooter, but there are games where, during that Warriors run where it's like he hits, 2 of his first 3 and all of a sudden the whole offensive dynamic has to change because you got to respect it. So,
right. Well, and if he's posted up beyond the arc, at least if you kick it out, he can shoot it. That's the thing. There's so many people out there like, dude, Ben Simmons doesn't have to shoot. All right, well, he doesn't have to shoot to be a good player. Fine.
Right.
But to be a great player and to really make this offense as good as it possibly can be, he needs to learn how to shoot. Because if he's sitting out on the perimeter when Josh Richardson has the ball or say Embiid has the ball in the post, you can't kick it out to him. And if you do, you know that he's not staying with the ball. So, I don't know. It's very frustrating, but here we are.
Now, outside of your favorite teams, what are you most surprised about with the first month of NBA? Is there anything that stuck out to you that was really taking you by surprise?
Trae Young is just spectacular, man. I expected him to be good. I didn't expect him to be this good. Remarkably solid from beyond the arc. He'll shoot from anywhere, but actually knock them down. That's one thing that really stood out. The other thing is, I was looking through a tweet. I remember tweeting about Doncic last year. It was in January. And I said, Doncic will be a top 5 player by 2021. Me thinking that's a hot take, right? This is before Durant got hurt, but you still have Durant. You still have LeBron. You still have Giannis. You still have Embiid, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Davis. Right, a lot of players. And, of course, I'm missing some. But he's probably a top 5 player right now. Mm-hmm. From a fantasy standpoint, you could make that argument all day long that Luka Doncic, and Harden, of course, we didn't mention. You could make the argument that Luka Doncic is a top 5 fantasy player. So on tonight's slate, for example, you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, James Harden, Doncic, Towns, Kawhi Leonard, Drummond, Irving, Beal, Trae Young, Westbrook, Embiid. Giannis is averaging 63 fantasy points per game. Harden 62. Doncic 61. I mean, he is up there with the likes of the best players in the league. And for what it's worth, I know this won't come out today, but there's no reason he should be 10,400 when Giannis or when Harden's 11,800. They should probably be closer in price with how well Doncic played. So that's one thing that stands out. I think Phoenix is a team that has played over their heads, but I like what Monty Williams has done. I think he's coached and managed this team pretty well. They've been kind of fun to watch. And outside of that, I mean, I guess the only crazy part is the Golden State Warriors with how their roster has completely changed from last season, and they might be the worst team in the league.
Yeah, it is. I'm actually a little surprised that I didn't expect more of this. I think that, it just makes sense. So much turnover roster-wise from last season, and I'm thinking that, we'll figure it out. And it's just like this league, outside of 5 or 6 of the staples that we knew would be consistent without much rush, like It's all over the place. I never thought, Toronto would still be worth anything having lost Kawhi, and it's like they're playing as if they never had him,
Yeah.
And it's not, and it doesn't matter. So it's exciting as an NBA fan. I think there's just something about NBA that's just so much different than the other sports. We love football, but it's only once a week, and but there's just something about the day to day, night to night, just enthusiasm with NBA and it's funny because I was a playoff NBA fan, and then I started playing DFS, and now it's NFL's 1A, NBA's 1B for me.
Yeah, oh yeah, I love NBA basketball so much more now because of DFS. There's no question that it has really elevated my love for the sport. I mean, before I was playing DFS, you'd watch a little regular season basketball, but it was hard to really, you wouldn't be like, oh, this game's on. I got to put, other than the Sixers, like, Thursday night TNT basketball. I'd turn it on if it was on, but I wasn't, actually looking forward to that stuff. Now we have NBA League Pass and you can watch whatever you want. But it's basketball from a DFS perspective is really enjoyable. It's also super tilting. Like all of these sports are tilting in their own right. With basketball, a blocked shot or an assist at the end of the game is all the difference. But in baseball, it moves slowly, but you could be winning by 15 points, winning a tournament by 15 points, and one swing of the bat not only takes you out of first place, but puts you down in 1,000th place. It's crazy how all of these sports, the dynamic is so much different, and what makes them great and what drives you nuts. Same thing with football, right? I was having a terrible week the other week around halftime of the 1 o'clock games, and then long touchdown to Marcus Brown and big play by whoever, and all it takes is 2 plays to put you right back in it. But yeah, it can be super tilting, man.
So that is a question I like to ask everybody is how do you cope with tilt and when things aren't going well, on an individual basis, something tilting happens, and then when it starts to compound, what are you doing to, help yourself not get in that rut, whether it's a bad night or a stat correction or, we see this with NBA, some of the hometown scoring is going to be a lot more generous for the home team than the away team. So what are you doing for the stuff outside of your control to not just let it, eat you from the inside out?
People that have like known me in this industry for a while know that I don't even look at my lineups until very much towards the end of the night. I actually, even when if we're playing 150 lineups, I know which guys are my core guys, and I'll track the scores, I'll watch the game, and I'll track the stats, and I do it in my head. I don't like to know what I'm up or what I'm down throughout the night, because that's one way that I've been able to kind of mitigate the tilt and the frustration. If I'm doing poorly, I know it. I don't have to look at the money. I know from whoever that I played. But the cool part is there's nothing worse. There's nothing, and of course with late swap, I pay attention to everything, and I'll go in if I need to swap guys out. Yeah, but in terms of looking at how much I'm winning or losing, looking at all of my lineups, I try not to, because I don't want to know who's chasing me or who I'm chasing. I don't want to have to now root against 8 players when I'm rooting against or when I'm rooting for all of these other players. It's been a way for me not to have as many concerns. I do it in my head. I say, all right, I'm probably doing pretty well, or I'm probably doing pretty poorly. And then towards the end of the night, I check in and see the results. But I try not to stay glued to my phone or the computer. I just have alerts on for news. And of course, I'm married. I live with my wife. I don't have kids either yet. But I can't be sitting watching in front of a TV for all hours of the night. She goes to sleep really early, and then I get to put all the games on. She'll watch some with me, of course, but I try to disconnect a little bit after doing 10 straight hours of DFS. I just have alerts on, and that makes it so I always know what news is breaking, and if I need to make adjustments, I will.
Yeah, I think that's really healthy, and I think that's one of the things that is pretty underrated about. That's been very helpful for me. Is I'll check in and see how I'm doing, if I'm up or down, But once I see I have something that can be competitive, I don't really like to look and know what I need to root for, because then I can get really tilted if a guy, all I need is a rebound from him to get a double-double and he doesn't get it, or a turnover drops.
You're checking your phone or your computer. I mean, it becomes like almost obsessive. Yeah.
It really does. It really does. And that's one of the things I'm trying to get better at is, because it's just crazy. There's like this like dumb part of my reptile brain that thinks like the more I update and the more I refresh and the more like mental energy I give, like it's going to help him. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's like,
it doesn't mean a damn thing whatsoever. Nope.
But it can be fun as long as it's like you're saying, as long as it doesn't, infringe on, becoming something that can be considered addiction. It's fun to tilt and blow off steam kind of a thing. It's like, hey, you know what? This really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of my life. So I when it can get unhealthy is when I think people should really try to listen to that, because this can go from fun to addiction very, very fast. So
it can, yeah. And of course, like that's a subject that you try and toe the line with that, especially if you remember all of the Ethan stuff came out, and they tried to. For anybody wondering what I'm talking about, there was like claims of quote unquote insider trading or having inside information, and I don't believe that was the case. It was the optics were bad. The guy won a lot of money that day, and people thought that he had access to information, and then what happened was you saw individual states trying to ban DFS, and that was at a point where I'm like, man, I had quit my job a couple of years prior to that, going full out into DFS. This was a time where I was really worried. I remember I did an article for the Washington Post. Well, they interviewed me in the Washington Post, and that was the time where all of this was going down. And he's asking like, hey, are you concerned about this? And, I'm very calmly like, nah, I think we'll be okay. But really, there were some legitimate concerns there, right? There were absolutely some concerns about that. And now I forget where I was going with this, but what was I talking about?
You were talking about Ethan and Tilton and focusing on what you can control.
Oh, right. Yeah. And there's a line to be towed when it comes to, talking about DFS. And remember, you used to not really even be allowed to say gambling. It was a skill game, which it is, of course, but there's always some luck involved.
Sure.
And I think you got to be careful about the whole, hey, does this become compulsive? Can this become addictive? Anything can become compulsive or addictive. So when we talk about this, it's really no different than so many other things that people might enjoy, that, there's a line to it. So it's not like DFS is unique in that sense at all. It's just, it is absolutely something to be careful about, and understand what type of limits to set, because something this fun and something this enjoyable, especially when you get that first big win, can get out of control in a hurry if you allow it to, for sure.
Well, and that's one of the things that I'm struggling with right now is, the wins and what it does to your brain endorphin wise, wins that I might be getting now. This time last year I'd be thrilled about, but I don't feel it as much. And it's just like, I need to take a step back. It's like, wait a second, John, like, you be happy about this, man. Like you're the dude who has been working his way through the lower stakes. Like these are how you fed your family type of wins in the past. Like don't discredit them because it's not life-changing money, or you see someone else have. And that's one of the things that I'm much better at is whenever I win, I try not to care what other people won, because there's always unless you win $1 million, there's going to be somebody that won more than you that day.
Yep. Oh yeah, there's no question about it, and like limiting that is certain. You don't want to root some people would rather somebody specific lose than them win if that person's winning more than they are, right? So you definitely don't want to fall into that trap where, you're having a good night, like you said, and you see somebody else, you're like, oh my God, they're winning again. It does you no good at all. And honestly, you fall into something like that. I've very much tried to put myself in a mindset where, you know what it is, John? It is anybody else's wins or losses are completely irrelevant to anything that happens with you, right?
Right.
100% unrelated. It does not matter. And I think when you start wasting energy and mental space on anybody other than yourself, and I'm not talking about in a selfish way, I'm talking about in their success or failures, it does nothing good for you. Actually, I think it really works against you.
It totally does. And that's one of the things that I've had to, get better at myself, because, you know how hard you work at this, and
that's what it is. Yeah.
And just, you know what, it's just like, you know what, it's that guy's, it's that guy's time. It's that guy's day. And this is where like the relationship building has really helped, because there'd be guys that I would see, we'd be fighting for stuff on a nightly basis. And now I know the guy, and it's like, oh shit, awesome. Will's getting after it tonight. Good for him, kind of a thing. And it's so much healthier, man. And I think everything comes back to, are you putting in a healthy amount of money in play? And for me, if I lose sleep over it, that's too much. It's too much. So I try to encourage other people, hey, you know what? Don't allow this amazing thing to become something that it can snowball very quickly.
Yeah, there was one that I lost sleep over. I'll tell you real quick if you want to hear it.
Hell yeah.
Okay. So I qualified for the DK NFL Live Final back in. They had done this big kickoff bash in Miami, Florida, Fontainebleau. They put us all up there. I couldn't take Justine, my wife at the time. I went with her brother, great guy, loves sports, not a DFS guy, but loves fantasy, and we'll talk about him literally all day. So we go there. They paid for everything. This was like 2015. This was a while ago. Remember that time where DK was kind of just like frivolously throwing money around?
Yeah, $1 million ad buys every single week. Hell yeah.
Right. So they paid for everything, just like free drinks every day, free food, beautiful hotel rooms, beautiful hotel, and then like this big sweat room where they had games set up and just everything for 3 straight days. It was on the beach. We went down like in the morning, went in the water, took a swim, came back. Everything was great. Well, they surprised everybody that was invited to it with an entry into a DK qualifier, and I happened to win that. And it was in San Diego, so this time I take my wife, we go to San Diego, and we had some like equity swaps, and I swapped some with a couple of people, 5%, 10%, and then what happened was there was a second round, so 10 people get it. I had Adrian Peterson get hurt in the first quarter, so like that was just miserable. But that's not where the pain came into play. Top 10 get in, and then they go to a final, which it was really dumb because they made it a playoff, like actual NFL playoffs. That was how you win.
Oh, okay, I remember this now. Yeah, I remember now.
Crazy, right?
Yeah,
it's like a 4-game slate to win $5 million.
Right,
$5 million was first place. So I think it was 5. So anyway, one of the guys that I swapped with, I think we swapped like 5 guys. One of them got in to the top 5 or top 10, and he was currently in first place by like 50 points because you keep your score from that week, and the following score is added on to that. So if I have 150 and you have 100, and then we both score 100 points in the second week of the final, I have 250 and you have 200.
Gotcha.
So somebody came to me. I had split a ticket with a friend of mine when we were both in this. So basically, for the qualifier, whoever won, we chop it 50-50. And so we get in, and so I had sold the 5%. We had swapped 5%, and he gets in. And think about it. The guy that I had already swapped with in the qualifier had 2.5% of that. I had 2.5%. So he came to me and said, "Hey, listen, do you want to take 2.5% and put that into this one?" It was another guy at the time. He was in like 7th place. I can't remember exactly how it went down. And I said, "No, I got 5% in this. He's in first place right now. He's got a 50-point lead. Like, I don't think I can do it." Well, it turns out the guy and my friend who had the 2.5 ended up doing it. So he swapped with him and he kept that. So he split it up. I think he had like maybe 1% and 1%, but $5 million, I think is a lot of money. So that guy that I turned down ended up winning the $5 million. And it would have been, I think, $100,000 to me just because he won. Turns out that the person that was in first place ended up coming in like 9th out of 10th. Just had a horrible, horrible week. Came up completely empty on that. Legitimately lost sleep over the decision not to make that swap. The $100,000 that turned into nothing. And, you can't look at it like that. But I'm telling you that this was years ago, too. This was like 4 years ago. That kept me up at night thinking about $100,000 is a lot of money. And it drove me nuts knowing that I'd have had 100,000, might have been 50, 100. I don't remember, but it was, multiple tens of thousands, John. And I didn't make that call. I said no. And you never to this day really know if it was the right decision or not, but the result wasn't.
So before we let you go, how do you go about shaking something like that? Because that's something that I struggle with, and I think a lot of players struggle with, where you'll have something do well, and you took a shot the day before and you didn't do well, and then you don't have any money to take a shot that day, and then you do really well, and you're like, if this was yesterday, my life has changed.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was hard to shake. It truly was, because not only did I not get that money, but I think I won. I think like last place. I wasn't last place, but in those where you're doing $5 million the first, there were 200 people that got in. I think it was like anywhere from 100th to 200 was $30,000 or $25,000. The min cash was $25,000, $30,000. So I won $25,000, $30,000, and I still had to split that with the guy that just took home the other 50 or 100. And that was the most awful feeling. Nothing against him, great guy.
Right.
Like great guy's done a lot for me too. But just knowing like, oh my God, not only did I just have an opportunity for life-changing money, but now I have to give away half of my min cash too.
Right.
I don't know how to shake it. I think you just eventually it's like there's nothing you can. Dwelling on that shit is so bad for you, but I'm not going to pretend here and act like I have, ultimate control over my emotions. That's a crazy thought. Like, yeah, stuff like that will bother you a lot. It's different in my opinion than saying, oh, if I only made this 2v2 swap, I'd have won the milli. Well, it came in 100. 98 people above you could be saying the same thing if they did something different, and behind you, the same thing. So, the whole what ifs do nothing for me, and I stay away from that. But something like that was tangible, like that was there, really stayed with me, and you just keep going. I don't think there was any way. I'm not, like I said, I'm not in control of myself to the point where I'm like, all right, let me sit down and meditate and shake this and change. No, it just eventually went away, but it sucked.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that is, it's almost like a blessing in disguise in the sense of these are opportunities to evolve, I guess you could say, because I there's sometimes where like I will just like tilt irrationally, and I've never had anything like that happen, but I think that, it's very easy to look and see what we lost by not making that decision. But sometimes I think about that kind of stuff, and it's like, I believe in God. So I think about like, what did that money, had I won it, but I didn't, or that relationship not work out or whatever, what potential greater heartache am I being saved from, kind of a thing. So
absolutely.
And I think that ultimately, like you're saying, we're imperfect humans. We can only, we can't beat ourselves up too much, but I think that is one opportunity. More than anything, DFS has helped me get over disappointment faster than I would normally be able to cope with certain things, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, just going back to what you were saying a second ago, like anyone that says that money is the root of all evil is a liar, and they've never been poor, and they've never spoken to homeless people. But the love of money, probably you could make an argument that the love of money is the root of all evil, to the point where it consumes you.
Right.
And in DFS, it's very easy. Money makes things easier. Like, not having money sucks. I've been in that position plenty of times. Money makes things easier where you're comfortable and you're not worrying about how you're going to pay the electric bill, or how you're going to buy food for your dog. Like, it was a long time ago, but I was in that position and it was brutal. But the idea where the acquisition and accumulation of money consumes you is where you get into really bad spots. And if there's one thing I did have control over, when that happened, I began to realize, like, oh my God, you're letting not having money affect you like this. And it's just like, it's very unbecoming of myself. And money comes and goes. You look at like economic mobility in this country, it's crazy. People are up, people are down. You get it back, you lose it, you get it back, and you lose it again. Fortunately, I guess for me in this case, I just never had it.
Well, I think that that's a really good attitude to have. And I think that, that's one thing that I struggle with. And, I have, people in my life to lean on when it's not going well. And, I was talking to my dad last night and trying to get out of this downswing. And he's like, look, 3 years ago, you didn't even have any of this money. So just be glad that you had it. And, you're going to figure this thing out and keep firing. And it's just like,
for sure.
Loughy, I just appreciate you, man. I thank you for making the time to do this. I know you've got, 10 million different things going on right now, and you're brutally honest about things that, I don't know how much you've shared on other platforms, but I really wanted to dig deep with you and just have, an open conversation on wherever the discussion took us. So I just thank you for being open to it and just, sharing parts of you that, maybe you haven't shown before. I just really admire the type of person that you are and really appreciate the role directly and indirectly that you've had in my life, man.
Awesome, man. Likewise. I really appreciate you inviting me on. This is a lot of fun. I love these free-flowing, open type of shows without any structure. Too much structure in the shows that I do anyway. So it's a lot of fun. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I thank you so much. Again, anybody follow Loughy on Twitter. He's at Loughy_D. If you can't find him, I'm chatting with him all the day. So if you're following me, he's one of the people I follow. Please tune into any of his shows. DFS so much is about investing into your future. We'll easily pull out $50,000 of student loan debt to pursue careers we don't want, but we'll balk at spending, $60 to get better at this thing that could literally change your life. So please invest in yourself. Invest in the sites that Loughy is a part of. It will definitely help your DFS game get better. Thank you, everybody that tuned in. I really appreciate everybody that's helping this new platform that we put together grow, and we're going to be doing more conversations like this in the future. And Loughy, man, I would love to have you on anytime you want to get together and just blow off some steam or get out of your normal routine to have a talk like this, buddy. I really, really appreciate it.
I'd love to do it again, man.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you on the next podcast or YouTube. Talk to you guys soon.